It is game week 10. I've already made one free transfer and I'm planning on making another one. With some big fixture swings upcoming, it's time to lock in for FPL game week 10. Hello and welcome to FPL Mate. Once again, my name is Dan and Game Week 9 was a bit of a disaster week. I am one of those unfortunate souls who did not have Van der Ven in my team, and therefore I got a red arrow. That's pretty much the rule of Game Week 9, right, guys? If you don't have Van der Ven, you don't get a green arrow. So unfortunately, I was not on the right side of that one. But the defense was okay for me. I think my defense is in a pretty good place right now. The real issue, I think, for a lot of people in Game Week 9 was that none of the popular attacking players really scored any points. Even some of the popular players I didn't have, players like Njai or Voltamada or whoever else, a lot of people really suffered in their attack. Very few attackers actually scoring points. So maybe you had Mbermo in your team. If you did, you know, fantastic. But again, I did not. So, yeah, a pretty weak score, 43 points in a surprisingly low-scoring week generally. And that is a red arrow for me, just under 200,000 places lost in Game Week 9. But it is still very tight. I am still very optimistic, and I really do like my team generally. And I think I'm going to be very well set up for Game Week 10, where I do have 2 free transfers going into Game Week 10. I mentioned I've already spent one. So, yeah, let's look at how we are shaping up. And yeah, like I said, I think it's looking pretty good. The optimism is still very much there. Before we move on to my team for Game Week 10, make sure you do drop a like on the video for some good karma in Game Week 10. And feel free to subscribe if you want to follow along with my moves each and every game week. Okay, so let's set up now. So we'll start off in goal. And we're going to have Raya in goal as always because, you know, Arsenal are just such a good defense. And Burnley away from home, I think we're all expecting a clean sheet in this game with no real concerns about that. Save points probably will not happen for Raya. Bonus points will be a bonus, but probably won't happen either. But certainly clean sheets. That's what you're looking for. You safe, secure, clean sheet every game week goalkeeper. That is what the Arsenal defense is right now, which is why I am so happy to double up going into my defense with Gabriel. And I do want to talk about Gabriel and my next defender, Malik Chow, in a little bit more detail and why they are so brilliant for Game Week 10. Because obviously I brought in Chow last week. A lot of people were surprised by that move because he is such a differential. But hopefully you're going to see why now, guys. So, as we know, of course, West Ham and Burnley are, you know, pretty weak attacks and don't typically create too many chances. But what's more important is that both Arsenal and Newcastle are really leading the way in terms of those defences. Both of these two teams sit at the top of the table for non-penalty expected goals conceded so far this season, which is really impressive stuff. So we're very happy about that. We've got players from the 2 strongest defenses in our FPL team, which is really nice. So we're happy about that. But I think we can go further than that. Not only is the clean sheets looking very tasty, very likely for this game week, but actually it goes a step further because when we're looking at those aerial threats, Gabriel is the primary target man from set pieces for Arsenal, and Malik Chow is the primary target man for set pieces for Newcastle. And if you look at this very same table, guys, right now, what we can see, if we look on the column where it says HD, and we go towards the bottom, this is shots from headers conceded, and you can see that West Ham and Burnley are way out in front on these metrics. West Ham have conceded 41 chances from headers, and Burnley have conceded 37 chances from headers. So these two teams are by far the 2 weakest teams from those headed opportunities. So we've got 2 defenders here with great clean sheet odds, playing for great defenses against weak attacks, and also they're the primary set piece header threat players playing against the 2 worst teams in the league for conceding headers. That is everything that we want right now, and this is why things have come together very nicely for this team. Now, obviously, we cannot predict the future in FPL, but what we can do is look at the patterns and look at what is likely to happen based on what we've seen previously. And you've got a really good chance for both Gabriel and Chow getting these mega hauls. It might not happen, granted, but we've got to be in it to win it. We've got to give ourselves a chance. We're playing the odds here and trying to attack these opportunities here, which I think is very tasty indeed. Our final defender is actually going to be Richard, who is currently flagged, but I do want to give an update on the Richards injury situation. So Apparently, he has had his scan and there's no tear on his calf. So there was some concerns midweek about his calf and maybe a calf injury, but there is no tear, just a little bit of a strain maybe, and he is expected to be fine versus Brentford, which is very, very good, because if we go to my bench, guys, then you can see that Alderete, I'm also still not sure if he's going to be available or not this weekend. He did have that concussion from a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully he is going to be fine to play this week, but I would prefer to play Richards. And there is a couple of reasons for that. The primary reason really is, well, it's defensive contributions, to be honest. So when we look at this table, for example, guys, and this is coming in from Tom Hadley, who is a brilliant when it comes to defensive contributions and all of the information regarding that stuff. And what you can see is, first of all, Richards is the 6th best defender in FPL right now for the defensive contributions. He is making 10.9 per game, which is really good, and he is hitting 10 or more in 67%, so 2/3 of his games. Really nice. And he's also facing Brentford, and as you can see when we look at the best opponents for getting those DEFCON points, Brentford are actually the 5th best for centre-backs to hit DEFCON again. So this is a really nice matchup in terms of looking to get defensive contributions. Now when we come to clean sheets, things maybe get a little bit trickier, but we have got some early clean sheet odds for this game week, guys. So what we can see is, obviously I have Alderete or I have Richards, and I have those two choices. Richards beats Alderete on DEFCON if they are both available. But maybe when we look at the clean sheet odds, it is a little tighter. So Crystal Palace and Sunderland both given a 31% chance of a clean sheet in game week 10, which is it's decent. Anything above 30, I think your defender is well worth playing. I could even consider playing Alderete and maybe benching one of my attacking players for this, but in a straight decision between Richards and Alderete, because the clean sheet odds are even and Richards' matchup for defensive contributions looks better and more secure for trying to get those points, it does make sense to me to play Richards. Of course, we have Senesi as well. Clean sheet odds just 12% away against Man City, so there's no way he is going to play, even though there is I guess a chance of a DEFCON. The problem is with Man City, I think generally when you're targeting defensive contributions, is that Man City have the ball so much that actually the opposition defenders don't actually have very much opportunity to do any actual defending because they just pass the ball around. So for that reason, I don't think Senesi is super strong for DEFCON. So I'm really hoping at least one of Richards or Alderete is available, because I'm really not expecting much from Senesi this week. I'm really waiting for maybe next week, but more likely the week after that, when once again Senesi can become a regular starter in our FPL team. So I'm holding off on him, leaving him late on my bench. And hopefully we're not going to need him. But yeah, there was loads to talk about there about the defenders and why we're picking these defenders. Because I think a big decision each week is to how to rotate your defenders, which ones to play, which ones to bench, etc. So yeah, that's where I am right now. We can move on into the midfield. And I think these decisions here are mostly a little bit simpler. So we've got Saka, of course, and obviously, last game week, he didn't play particularly well. He unfortunately was ill and was unable to train in the build-up to that game, and was even ill, still a little ill on the day. So that's one of the reasons, apparently, why Saka didn't really look at his best in game week 9. But he hopefully is going to be absolutely fine going into game week 10. He came off the bench in the midweek League Cup game against Brighton, where he obviously scored in that game, which is nice to see Saka getting some open play goals. And if we're talking about corners, set piece, assists, then Saka is obviously going to have that corner share from the right-hand side. So maybe he can get that perfect goal for your FPL, when you get a Saka assist for a Gabriel headed goal. That would be amazing. But certainly this is the kind of fixture where we might expect that to happen. But we're going to see open play crosses from Saka as well, which could damage the likes of Burnley. And I think particularly Burnley as a team who we are expecting to, dig in deep, play pretty defensively, a lot of men behind the ball. It's going to be Saka, the kind of player who can produce those magical moments. Is going to be the kind of player who is going to thrive in this game and really open up the game for Arsenal. So for that reason, I am confident in Saka going into this week, despite the blank in game week 9. Hopefully, he's going to get a few more minutes than he did in game week 9 as well. Bruno Fernandes is still in my team. A lot of people thinking about switching to Mbeumo. I think the two players are around even. Bruno's open play data is still very strong. I know people think, he is going to rely on penalties. but he is playing a little bit more advanced in the last couple of games. He's playing as more of an 8 than a 6. Still looking really strong for defensive contributions, but being able to get more involved in the attacking play for Manchester United. So I think Bruno is definitely still a player to watch, and hopefully we are going to get some more attacking returns from him in the near future. And look, penalties are a bonus if we can get some of them, because it always looks like Manchester United could get a penalty in any given game because of the types of players they have. Those kind of dribbly players in and around the box is very useful there. We've got Semenyo here in our teams away against Man City, but as we see every week, Man City are not an unbeatable team in terms of their defence, and I think Bournemouth will fancy themselves in this game following that defeat to Aston Villa that Man City saw in Game Week 9. So Semenyo, hopefully this is going to open up for him a little bit. One concern is that Semenyo, with Krupi Jr. playing, does seem a little bit of a weaker option currently. I think Evan-Nilsson really helps to bring Semenyo into the game, which is why I think Evan-Nilsson is the long-term play for Bournemouth. I don't think Krupi Jr. is going to become a main starter because Evan-Nilsson offers so much more than just goals. He brings in his players, and I think Semenyo really benefits from Evan-Nilsson kind of occupying some of the centre-backs and stuff like that. So right now, if Krupi Jr., if we think he's going to play it against Man City, in that sense, I think that might damage Semenyo. I'd like to see him make more runs and, be a little bit more involved. But also, Bournemouth are going to fancy themselves in this game. So, difficult to say. I don't think we're going to see the best of Semenyo this week, but we won't see the worst of him either. But the best is coming back, I think, if Evan-Nilsson returns in Game Week 11, which I think he will. Kudus is in my team. A disappointing blank in Game Week 9. Another game week where he gets the second assist rather than the assist. Those corner routines that Spurs are currently playing do not involve Kudus directly passing to the goal scorer, evidently. So a little bit of concern there. Chelsea is a good fixture, however. They've been conceding a lot of chances recently, and you probably saw from the table earlier that Chelsea are actually one of the weaker defences in terms of chances conceded at the moment. So for that reason, Kudus as the best attacker at Spurs, maybe has a chance. But generally, Spurs are not looking great at the moment. I know they did get that victory over Everton, but it was far from convincing for those of you guys who watched the match. And, Kudus maybe a little wider than we would hope. Didn't really get those opportunities to counter-attack. Is he going to have those opportunities against Chelsea? I am so on the fence about this one. He's certainly not a must-sell, but it's a case of, are there any better options right now that we can go for? And that's something I do want to discuss. Our final midfielder right now is Enzo Fernandez. Last game week, he did take a couple of shots, did create plenty in that game, and his underlying data continues to look very, very strong with Palmer out of the team. Even when he is playing a little bit deeper, his box crashing, creativity, and set piece share actually make him a pretty useful FPL asset for the fairly cheap price tag of 6.7 million. Like I say, Spurs are not looking great right now, and I think their clean sheet last week is masking over the fact that they are conceding a huge amount of chances. And when they play against some more difficult oppositions with more clinical forwards, and you would hope that Chelsea do have more clinical forwards than the likes of Everton, then maybe they are going to suffer. Now, typically this game between Spurs and Chelsea is very, very heated, very high scoring, and I'm kind of in a way thinking Kudus and Enzo, having both these players, we could benefit from a high scoring game here, but I don't know what to expect because the form of not just Spurs, but also Chelsea leaves so much to be desired right now. And these two teams are just all over the place. We don't know if they're good or bad. It seems to change and flick back and forth every week. So who knows? Who knows? I guess you got to be in it to win it. You got to have these attacking players from these games to give yourself a chance. But I can't call this game. So I would love to get your opinions and perspectives, guys. What is your prediction on the Chelsea versus Spurs game? What do you think is going to happen in that game? Because I would love to know. I think whatever the case, it will be a great game to watch for the neutral, that's for sure. Let's move on to the forwards, guys, before we look at the transfer. So we've got Erling Haaland here. Haaland is against Bournemouth at home, and yeah, obviously no goal last week, and Bournemouth being what is typically considered a tough defense so far this season. You have to think about things stylistically, and stylistically, a Haaland with a full rest midweek against Bournemouth on the counter-attack against a reasonably high line. Obviously, Bournemouth like to play with the ball and they like to play with a high line. Maybe Haaland can capitalise on that. And what we've seen already this season is Mateta go ahead and score 3 goals against Bournemouth, generate 3.67 XG against Bournemouth, something like that. And when you see Mateta doing that against Bournemouth just a couple of weeks ago, you've got to think, okay, now what could Haaland do with 3.67 XG? That's a 5 goal, right? I'm not saying that's going to happen, of course, but, you know, you have to acknowledge the possibility of, you know, these kind of things happening. You're getting Haaland not just getting a goal, but getting a couple of goals here and potentially getting a haul on here. So when it comes to the captaincy decision, we're going to come back to this one, but I genuinely think Haaland has big haul potential, even in a game against what is not typically considered an easy fixture. Because again, we're talking about matchups here a little bit. And Joao Pedro, another game for him last week with no shots. No shots on target in who knows how long. It has been crazy. 5 game weeks now, I believe, and you know, no matter what position he plays, even when Chelsea have 11 men, it doesn't seem to get better for Joao Pedro. We think Enzo is probably going to be the penalty taker as well for Chelsea and not Joao Pedro. So there are some concerns there, particularly with Delap coming back as well. Could we see Joao Pedro finally getting some Premier League game rest time, potentially, particularly as things aren't really working out right now? You do have to wonder going into the future, you know, with Delap there. Tyrick George as well, playing well in the midweek, getting his goal. So, yeah, Joao Pedro is such a tricky one, man. I think it's just time to bin him, to be totally honest. And yeah, that's what I've already done. I can't lie to you. So yeah, this is what my team is looking like pre-transfers. I've already made 1 transfer. I did this to beat the price changes, and that did involve selling Joao Pedro. But I am eyeing up a second transfer move. Right now, I am 60% likely to make the second transfer move, but I'm not 100%. and probably will decide either tomorrow or on Saturday whether I want to go ahead and make that move or not, because I'm really on the fence about it. But we'll tell you about the 2 transfers anyway. 1 is done, 1 is a consideration. So first of all, the Joao Pedro to Mateta move is done. I think this one is just a super obvious transfer to make. And the second potential transfer is moving Kudus to Salah. Both of these transfers, free transfers, by the way. Maybe this is, you know, going in too much on Crystal Palace potentially, but let's talk this through anyway. So first of all, the Joao Pedro to Mateta transfer, I think, just makes perfect sense. Yes, Joao Pedro has good fixtures, but if you look at these fixtures for Mateta, they are just as good. We've got Brentford, Brighton, and Wolves in the next 3. That is just as good as Spurs, Wolves, and Burnley in the next 3, I would say. Just as good, those 3 fixtures. And if you look over 4 game weeks where Enzo, Joao Pedro, and all of the other Chelsea players face Arsenal in game week 13, well, Mateta faces Man United in game week 13, which actually is not such a bad fixture either. Add to that the fact that Mateta is going to be on penalties and Joao Pedro is possibly but unlikely to be on penalties. And we look at Mateta's data. Is infinitely better than Joao Pedro's. Mateta's data is only bested by Haaland's at the moment in terms of that XG. He's closing in on 1 XG per 90, which is really, really strong for Mateta. I appreciate that was inflated a few weeks ago against Bournemouth, but even before that, even around that, it's looked really strong. Remember, he played Arsenal last week, which is going to make his data look really bad in that game week as well. So maybe there's more balance there than you would think. So great data. Mateta actually has form as well compared to Joao Pedro. So you've got data, you've got form, you've got fixtures that are just as good. You've got penalties there as well. And I think when you add all of that together, it just kind of makes it a no-brainer transfer. If you want to improve your team and you have free transfers, why would you not do that? Because it seems like this is a pretty obvious improvement in the team. You know, even if it doesn't pay off in 1 game week, when we look at 2 game weeks, 3 game weeks, I think this does pay off because you've got that nailedness from Mateta, and Nketiah got injured in the midweek with a hamstring injury, so you know you're going to get minutes from Mateta. Some people saying, oh, if Mateta has to play all the games, is he going to make him fatigued or worse? I wouldn't overthink this one, to be honest. Mateta's got minutes over Joao Pedro as well now. So everything favours Mateta. It is such an obvious transfer, and that is why I've made it. And I don't really think there are too many arguments to not make this transfer. The only other argument is maybe if you prefer another forward as a replacement to Joao Pedro, because there are a couple of other options, I suppose. Voltemada, Thiago, other players that could work depending on your budget and other transfer plans that you might have in your team. As for Kudus to Salah, this is a really tricky one. So I'm going to pull up some comparisons between these players, and all the data, by the way, you've seen in these videos, guys, and these sheets are from Fantasy Football Hub. You can check it out using the link in the description if you would like to. And you can see basically that Kudus versus Salah, Kudus is much better for his creativity for, you know, the assists, the key passes, the big chances created. However, when we look at the goal scoring, the XG, the big chances, the shots in the box, that all much more favours Ismaila Sarr, who is more of a shooter. So Kudus more of a creator, Sarr more of a shooter. And therefore, Sarr is going to be the player who has that higher ceiling for points because obviously goals are worth more than assists. When we look at the expected FPL points so far, actually Sarr has a much better expected points. So overall, looking at all of the metrics, Sarr has been expected to score more points than Kudus so far this season per start. However, Kudus has actually been scoring slightly more points per start than Sarr, or per 90 than Sarr. And that is due to a massive overperformance on the assists versus the expected assists for Sarr. So we can see, guys, that actually Kudus has 5 assists from, what is it, just 1.2 expected assists, which is, you know, a huge overperformance there, and we don't know if that is going to be sustainable or not. You look at the XG, by the way, guys, and it is 1.3 XG for Kudus so far this season, and that's in total, by the way, versus 3.2 for Sarr, who has played less minutes as well, significantly less minutes than Kudus. So I think really we are looking at Sarr as a better option. If you look at the projected points as well, it does favour Sarr over Kudus. So the models, the algorithms do prefer Sarr to Kudus as well. So I think there's no doubt really in my mind that Sarr is a better pick than Kudus. Kudus also faces Arsenal in game week 12. So I'm going to have to sell Kudus by that fixture anyway, because fixtures right now for Spurs are not particularly good, but you know, next 2 game weeks you could survive with some Spurs players. But from game week game week 12, things just look really, really bad. The fixtures are really, really tough, particularly for attackers. You know, Arsenal away, even Fulham, and then we've got Newcastle after that, away from home. So these are really tough fixtures for Spurs to get attacking returns in, and therefore I'm going to have to sell Kudus at one point. And I think one thing that will make me certain of this transfer is if it looks like there's going to be a price change before the deadline. If it looks like either Kudus is going to drop in price or Sarr is going to raise in price, maybe even both, then I will definitely make this move and just get ahead of the game. But also there is that part of me that thinks if I do make this move, this is the kind of move that could backfire. I can definitely see Kudus getting something against Chelsea, but equally, you know, I can see Sarr getting something against Brentford. I don't think Brentford is the perfect fixture, by the way, but you know, I think Chelsea at home, there is an argument to say that Chelsea at home is a better fixture right now than Brentford at home. But again, I don't know what you guys think about that one. But we are, I think, going to go for Sarr. I think any price changes will make it 100% for me. But right now, I'm like 60% going to make this move, 40% not going to make this move. So again, I'll be keen to get your opinions, your thoughts on that one. I think it makes sense. And I think after if I do make both of those transfers, already made one, I think this team looks really, really strong. So we've got the defensive matchups that work really, really well. Even Richards with the DEFCON. We've got a strong midfield, all strong midfielders. And we've got the 2 best forwards in the game right now. Sorry, Voltamada owners, but I do think Haaland and Mateta are the 2 best forwards in FPL right now to have in your team. This is a really strong team, in my opinion. It's a team that has been, you know, a couple of weeks in the making, a little bit of crafting involved, and it has a really healthy balance between a lot of the popular players, but also some differentials here as well. Malik Chow, very few people own him. We've got Sarr here. I don't think too many people are going to have him right now as well. Some people might go for him. Bruno is becoming less and less popular, but I still think he's a really good pick. So there's lots of players here that are going to really help me. They're going to be able to help me really jump up the ranks very quickly if they do well. Like a few of these players, I think can explode and can rocket me up the tables. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for really with a lot of these players. And plus we've got, you know, those key players, you know, Semenyo, Haaland, these kind of players, you know, Gabriel and Raya, these players that, you know, a lot of people do have in their team already. That just form the base of your team, really. Even Saka, to be fair, is, you know, there's somewhat of a differential there. You know, the big Saka versus Gyökeres debate rages on. So, yeah, this is what my team is looking like right now. Fantasy Football Hub is giving my team a 99% team rating. So, obviously, it's working well for the underlying data and stuff like that, which is good because, you know, I've been working very hard to ensure this team does look good for the underlying data. By the way, guys, Haaland captain for me and Gabriel vice captain. I think this is the way I do want to play this one. I just think that Haaland really does have that haul potential. I'm not expecting defcons for Gabriel against Burnley. So you'd really be betting on Gabriel scoring, and even Gabriel scoring with a clean sheet there. You know, is that really more likely than Haaland getting 2 goals in this game against Bournemouth? I'm not sure. So I think I'm going to go for Haaland. But honestly, if you go for Gabriel, who's, in my opinion, the second best captain this week, I do not blame you one bit. That is a nice high risk, high reward kind of play. And if it was later on in the season and I wasn't happy with my rank right now, I would definitely be going for Gabriel this week. But for now, I think we're going to stick with Haaland for this week because I think he's going to be back to his best after a full rest. I'm a poet and I didn't even realize it. I'm looking at the Enzo to Salah move. So I just want to show you that the projected points do definitely favor Salah. Szoboszlai, by the way, looking good for in a couple of weeks' time. So definitely looking at him. Sorry, kudos to Salah it was, wasn't it? So kudos to Salah. That's going to free up 0.2 million as well. I didn't mention that, and maybe that could be handy down the line. So yeah, that looks like a transfer that is going to improve my team. But yeah, I have mentioned Szoboszlai already this game week in a video, but he is also a player that I'm looking at, and Hub likes him as well for the predicted points. So I wanted to flag that one. But yeah, this is what my team is looking like. That's going to actually bring my team to 100% rating if I were to make that transfer. So look, it's a data-backed team, which is something that we definitely need to be looking at least somewhat looking at, because that's hopefully going to give us some longevity in our FPL picks. If you want to check this tool out for yourself, you can have a look in the link at the description. Get it yourself a full membership, 50% off right now on Fantasy Football Hub using my link in the description. And yeah, you can get access to all of the data tools that we've used in today's video, as well as the team tool and all of those projected points and suggested transfers and things like that, which are super useful too. Guys, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, do subscribe if you're new around here. We're going to be back tomorrow for another video with some final decisions, and we've got to talk about double and blank game weeks, and we're going to go in detail on that one in tomorrow's video, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you are subscribed, and yes, I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.